Thank you. My name is Suzanne Patzold, spelled S-U-S-A-N-N-E, P-A-T-Z-O-L-D. I live in Englewood, New Jersey. All of my friends in New Jersey are very much against hydrofracking. I think you should all know that. But I am speaking on behalf of me, the human race, and all the little animals that can't be here today. Dogs, cows, you name it. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I'm surprised that the DEC is not here today. Oh, I guess they don't have enough people after all. They say that they can monitor all these wells, but they can't supply one person to be here today. I'm surprised, or not. Which brings me to the next very important point. We're here to talk about regulations of the SGEIS drafts. And I have been wondering now for the last 3 years, how can you possibly regulate something that you cannot control? Anyone who's ever dropped something or spilled something or tripped or had a little accident knows that you can't control everything. And that's the definition of an accident, part of a definition. And speaking of definitions, high volume hydraulic fracturing, by definition, is a purposefully destructive procedure. It's meant to be destructive. That's what it does. It fractures. And anyone who ever had a broken bone knows what that means. And because it's so destructive, it's highly problematic that it will be dangerous. I think that the gas companies, among other things, should be told they cannot do the hydrofracturing at all, ever again, anywhere. That's my opinion. They should be compelled, of course, to tell everyone very publicly what chemicals they are using to extract the gas, what comes out of the wells while they're doing it that might be buried underground naturally. And I'm sure all of those tanker trucks are not coming back to the wells empty. They're probably coming filled with toxic waste that they can't get rid of anyplace else. But, oh, look, there's a hole in the ground. Let's dump it in there. And anyone who's ever lived near dump sites knows. I worked at Ford Motor Company in Mahwah years ago, 35 years ago, when they were dumping for the longest time in Ringwood, which is a watershed area. They still can't clean it up. They can't get the toxic sludge out of the old mines. It's impossible. Who are they kidding? But I think their primary purpose is, aside from making money on selling the gas to the highest bidder, is another place to dump other toxic waste from other sites that they can't dump anywhere else. Thank you so much.
Jan Littleton.
Hello, my name is Jan London from Narrowsburg, New York. I'd like to thank you for having this additional hearing. I went to the Sullivan County had one, and it was so full, couldn't speak. It was overwhelming. Anyway, I'd like to offer my stance opposed to hydraulic fracture, horizontal high-volume gas drilling in New York State. Those who support the industry quote the company line that there has never been any damage caused to a water well caused by this type of drilling. What if there was proof? Would that help steer your decision? I'd like to play a short segment from a lecture from Dr. Terry Engelder, Penn State professor who is regarded as the godfather of the Marcellus Shale. His predictions of gas in the shale started the gas rush in this region, and he is the industry spokesperson.
Said a lot of things that anyone would argue was a gusher of hogwash. Now, let me put an example of this up. This is a letter written by Cabot last fall. You recognize the chairman and president Dingus signs it, and it says, "You continue to trumpet this fictional incident in an effort to stir up public opposition." Now, what he's talking about, of course, is the Ferentino well that went horribly wrong on the 1st of January 2009. And I put a disclaimer up here. I point out, of course, we all agree, I think everyone in the room would agree, that that particular statement underlined right here is a gusher of hogwash. No doubt about it. But I say, while this paragraph is hogwash, don't take it out of context. This is an obvious step in Cabot's defense during the legal process in the Demick dispute with landowners. And don't think for a minute that Dingus even believes that this sentence is true, but it's just part of the process that brings a lot of hogwash into the legal system. All right, now, what happened in this particular editorial?
All right, so here he clearly admits that Dimick went horribly wrong. To ignore and deny this is criminal. The industry doesn't even dispute the air pollution problem caused by fracking. What percentage of failure and damage is acceptable? If I can't smoke in public because secondhand smoke may hurt my neighbor, but spewing toxins from my well towards my neighbor is acceptable. If doing this practice correctly and safely will cost too much, then I say don't do it. Thank you.
Alicia Pagano.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alicia Pagano, ALICIA-PAGANO. And I was born in Sydney, New York, and grew up in Unadilla, and then went away and studied to become a professor in education. And I've learned there that prevention is better than remediation. Today, I'm making my comments and talking directly to you, Governor Cuomo, and to you, all the people on DEC who are working on these regulations, because I think you are the people we need to talk to. Everybody here in the audience with me knows that to ban fracking is the right thing to do, but we're not certain that you know that, because it's better to prevent than to remediate. And regulations would show us that you're wanting to regulate, and that's much more difficult than preventing. So Governor Cuomo and people on the DEC, perhaps you're looking at water as a commodity. I understand that that's becoming very good on the stock market now. And if you invest in water as a commodity, then you don't worry about losing our water because you're going to buy it somewhere else and you're going to make money on it. Or if you're encouraging the health industry to grow and the pharmaceuticals to grow, then maybe you're really wanting us to have fracking so that they can take care of all of our health issues. Now I would like to address the DEC regulations, which you asked us to do today. How are you going to regulate? How do you intend to regulate? It's not written in your regulations how you're going to regulate if you don't even have enough money to come here to our one little meeting here on a Saturday afternoon. If you don't have enough money to do that, how are you going to have enough money to do it throughout the United States? Okay? And if you're going to exclude New York City and Syracuse, are you really trying to pit the urban people against the rural people? Don't you know that we people who live in the rural areas drink water too and need to be healthy? These are just some of the complaints. So I'm going to ask you directly, Governor Cuomo and people on the DEC, are you really trying to ruin the world that you live in? Do you want to kill yourselves, your children, and your grandchildren, and us along with you by doing this dangerous thing of allowing fracking? Thank you. I hope you listen to me.
William Turek, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-T-U-R-I-C-K. I live in East Meredith, New York. I'd like to read an account from a farm in Bradford County from the real world. When the folks of Pennsylvania first heard the wells coming, they were excited. No one had ever experienced the drilling business, so there was nothing to fear. They had toiled their whole lives just to make ends meet. Maybe this was the road to a better life. Then they came. Trucks by the hundreds, tankers, dump trucks, drilling rigs, fracking rigs. 5-acre drilling pads were bulldozed in the middle of the farmers' best fields. Million-gallon ponds were installed, roads were built, woods and fields were trenched, and bulldozed for tie lines. Drilling rigs went up at an unbelievable rate. For one spot on our farm, we could count 8 rigs. Then the generators started. You could hear them a half a mile away. Then the pumping stations. Small industrial sites with buildings and pipes sticking up out of the ground. I'm going to skip something. The one important paragraph that I feel is, but it goes much deeper than this. It creates greed and pits neighbors against neighbors, even dividing families. Back home, all rental properties now house gas people as the landlords raised the rent so high that longtime tenants were forced to move. Every parking area is lined with pipes and equipment associated with the gas business. Roads have been destroyed and are barely passable. Motorists are being forced to the road by the steady stream of big rig and trucks. People who used to have a few cars going by the house now endure 100 tractor trailers a day. As far as the SGEIS, some of the things that bother me is this: no analysis of fracking's true costs, the increase in fire, police, ambulance corps. There's been no adequate assessment of serious health impacts on fracking. Failure to include Department of Health into the fracking review. Failure to ban any chemicals, including toxic chemicals known to humans and animals as carcinogens. Failed to analyze the cumulative impact of full build-out of the gas wells. Reviewing applications one at a time in isolation. Industry drills wells in multiple. Fracking waste is still not classified as hazardous before it is pumped into the ground or after it is retrieved and left on the ground. There's no plan for disposal of hazardous fracking waste in New York. No wastewater treatment plants assigned to treat high-volume fracking chemicals. We just cannot live. We can live without fossil fuels. We cannot exist without water. And one final thing I'd like to say: I don't believe the state of New York can afford hydrofracking. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Dobbs.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Gex, R-O-B, G-O-E-C-K-S. My comment to the political decision makers of New York is, why now? My observations regarding SGEIS are basically it's inadequate in its current form in terms of its scope, in terms of the quantity of reliable information that it provides, and in terms of its objectivity. In terms of scope, even the macroeconomics of gas drilling are not known at this time. We talk about the quantity of gas we have in the United States. It's recently been reported in the Financial Times that China, who would be a potential buyer of natural gas, has discovered that they have approximately 300 years worth of natural gas there. And countries around the world are continuing to discover their resources. So the price point of supply and demand hasn't been determined yet. And that's a key issue in terms of deciding the strategic issues. As to the costs and revenues that accrue to the states, to the counties, and to the individuals in the communities, the jobs they create, there's insufficient data on that. There are statements made without support. Many of the people have talked here about the costs. The issue then becomes, why now? Who's pushing for a decision now? And the answer is those people who would profit early in this situation. Those people who are advocating for drilling rights now are also advocating for a lack of transparency in terms of what actually goes into the fracking process and into our environment. They're also advocating a lack of federal oversight, and they're also advocating tax benefits in order to convert our gasoline engines gets into other gas engines and other things. And so their means of paying for the costs they generate is a taxpayer bailout through tax incentives. Basically, we're at a speculative state in terms of fracking at this point in time. And at the speculating state, the only persons with expertise are the speculators themselves. They're looking at the buying and selling and securitizing of drilling rights, which sounds all too familiar with us. And their byline back and forth between each other is, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. But while they'll be gone, you and I and our environment and our communities in the state of New York will still be here. In its current form, the EGEIS is insufficient in terms of making strategic, long-term decisions for regulating and supervising an extremely high-risk industry for a long period of time. Thank you.
I'm Jack Tessier, J-A-C-K-T-E-S-S-I-E-R. I'm a resident of the village of Delhi. The data are in. If you look at the proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences May 17 issue, Osborne et al. Showed that methane from the deep rocks that are fracked ends up in the drinking water. Governor Cuomo, I don't want to drink methane. The U.S. EPA data from Pavilion, Wyoming show that fracking fluids end up in drinking water. One company who has actually published some of the things they put in the fracking fluids proudly say that that includes things that go into drain cleaner. Governor, I do not want to drink drain cleaner. The data from a seismologist in Ohio shows that pushing that wastewater back into the ground causes earthquakes. This is an example of a lack of object permanence. In adults, if you cover a toddler's toy with a blanket, they think it disappears and it's gone. It is not. The fracking fluid is still there. Governor, we don't need more earthquakes. There is no regulation that can save us from these things that are going to happen in New York State. There is no way that an SGEIS, the DC, or the governor can protect us from these things. We have to ban fracking, period. We must use the precautionary principle in this case. The benefits are short-term and narrow. They're for the people who can lease their land to the gas companies, make enough money, and leave. The risk is long-term and widespread. Our water will be polluted. Our rivers and streams will be gone. Our forests will be destroyed. We'll all have diseases that are not good. This is an addiction. We have to face the fact that we are addicted to fossil fuels. We have to realize it. We have to admit it, and we have to move on. I encourage you all to read Bill McKibben's book, Wandering Home. He describes the Champlain Valley as an area that can sustain itself with its local resources. We can do that in the Catskill region. We can do that across New York State. Some of the things that we can do in place of fracking to spur our economy are these. Sustainable energy. Solar, wind, geothermal, hydrogen produced by solar panels. A local farming market that is organic and sustainable. Tourism in all its forms. Arts and cultural activities in all of their forms. And education. Collectively, these are sustainable activities. They will build a strong economy. They will maintain a healthy and happy society, and they will protect our ecosystems and the structure and function that they need, both for their innate beauty and for the natural resources on which we all depend for our society. Governor, I encourage you to make a sustainable decision. We only have one state. This is the time to make a good decision. Thank you.
Linda Gex.
Thank you. My name is Linda Gex, that's L-I-N-D-A, G as in golf, O-E-C-K-S as in Sam. I'm a resident of Andes. My greatest concern about the process of hydrofracking, other than the obvious environmental issues that have already been discussed at length, is what I know is called correlative rights. It seems to me that there are many people who live in upstate New York who feel that they have the absolute God-given right to do anything they want to on their land. Well, that's not exactly true as far as it impacts your other neighbors and their rights. It's a selfish position, even though I have sympathy about their economic needs. I have economic needs too. I have also God-given rights to fresh air and good water that may be impacted by my neighbor's desire to sell their lease, regardless of what it does to my rights. I feel that the government of this state needs to recognize that all of us need our rights protected, not just some. My second concern about hydrofracking is the process itself and the true inability of our regulators to govern and regulate the process. It's not really possible, unless, of course, you're looking at hiring a great many extra government workers. Is that really what we want to spend our money on? The third thing that bothers me a great deal about this process of hydrofracking is that oil companies are tending to wrap their processes in the American flag, that if you don't like it, you're un-American, that if you don't see this as a bridge between fuels of the past and fuels of the future, you're an-American. You just don't have a worldview. That's not true. If we want to have sustainable fuels, let's get on with it. I'd like to see New York lead the nation in high technology, not low benefits. Lastly, I'd like to quote something out of the New York Times that I thought was quite nice. In Amwell Township, Pennsylvania, the dividing line isn't between those who are for natural gas drilling and those who are against it. It's between those who are getting rich and those who are paying the price. I ask you, who is going to pay the price? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lodi Marsh, M-A-R-S-H, a proud member of Friends of Sustainable Sydney. My husband Ray and I love our 200-acre farm. We border Carrs Creek, have a 1,000-bush organic blueberry field, and have added ponds and wetlands. The biggest threat to our water is slickwater hydraulic fracturing, aka fracking, for unconventional natural gas shale. How clever of the gas industry to call it hydrofracking instead of what it really is, hydrochemical. To allow this in New York State, knowing how damaging not only to the environment but our water, is unconscionable. The destruction from fracking obviously was known and would explain the loophole exempting the gas and oil industry from the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Superfund, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, and the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. The benefit of drilling will serve big business, the 1%, the gas companies. The people who want drilling want that lease, thinking they'll become shaleonaires. They are so blinded by the possible income, they can't rationalize what they will lose and what damage they will cause themselves and their neighbors by allowing gas companies on their property. Drilling companies don't have to provide any type of references, pass any courses, show any safety record, report any past violations, or be competent. How is this possible? Do not allow drilling in New York State. Companies in Pennsylvania have extracted so much gas, they have started shipping it out on its way overseas. The profit is not ours. The damage left behind is ours. Gas companies and the frackers give no thought about our clean, delicious water of the land, of fresh air, of peace and quiet, of our community, of our livelihood, of agriculture, of wildlife, of leisurely drives, of the night skies, of our way of life, of our dreams, of our health, of our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Midge Maroney.
Good afternoon. My name is Midge Maroney, M-I-D-G-E, M-A-R-O-N-I. I have a house in Sullivan County, Livingston Manor. By profession, I'm an English teacher. So thanks for the opportunity for me to lend my voice in opposition of hydrofracking for natural gas extraction. Over the past couple of years, I've been reading and learning as much as possible about the possible extraction of natural gas using hydrofracking, what's happened in the state of Pennsylvania where I grew up, and what's happening elsewhere in the country, and what I am terribly, terribly afraid may happen where I live now in New York State. First of all, we need to know and remind the governor that there have been no long-term studies of the potential hazards to human health that fracking may present. Before we permit our pristine water, our land to undergo fracking procedures, we need reassurances from the scientific, medical, environmental experts that no human life will be harmed. No amount of gas is worth the cost of one human life. From what I've seen and read, fracking presents serious dangers to human health, to pollute our air, water, and land. Most experts acknowledge that fracking uses millions, if not billions, of gallons of our fresh, pristine water. I have not heard of any major objective study that will accurately predict what will happen to our land, to our water, if the gas industry consumes the billions of our gallons of water. We have no assurances that we will ever have clean water to sustain human life the way it does today. There are so many serious dangers that fracking poses to both our air and water and land. Please do not permit any fracking until we can be assured by honest, objective, scientific, medical research that shows that hydrofracking will never pollute our air and water, that it can never harm human life. We must all be reassured that all the toxic, inorganic waste products that result from fracking may be disposed of safely. If we do not get such reassurances, then we should never allow fracking to happen. We should never allow fracking to poison and kill us. Again, until we can be reassured about where the fracking fluids will be disposed of, we should not permit them to even come into our state. We should instead support all sustainable energy resources. No humans have figured out yet how to make lakes, rivers, streams, our clean, beautiful aquifers that we enjoy today. If there are no alternatives to making water, we know there are alternatives to natural gas. All right, thank you very much. Please continue the moratorium. Make it forever. Thank you.
We will have one more speaker and then we will take a short break. Movement in the middle before it's too late. Jill Weiner.
Hi, my name is Jill Weiner. I live in Sullivan County. My name is spelled Jill, Jill, Winer. And I'd like to, I've read the draft, and it seems to me like the DEC has not really been paying attention to events that are happening in the real world. So I just pulled a couple of headlines from the last few days that I believe the DEC and the administration should be paying attention to. So January 6th, that was yesterday, an article in Discovery News, can fracking cause quakes? I think the answer is yes. So did Discovery News. Fracking well catches fire. That's from State Impact and NPR in Texas. The whole fracking world eyes U.S. shale, Bloomberg. That's a nice article about how China, France, and Japan are buying up rights to frack in the United States and Canada. France, those clever French, They won't frack at home, but they'll come here. I says, payback for the Freedom Fries debacle? I don't know. January 6th in Reuters, Fidel Castro says, world marching into abyss with shale gas. Fidel can see it. Cuomo, can you too? January 5th, Delaware Highlands Conservancy nixes gas drilling on easement land. That's from the Northeast Eagle in Pennsylvania. January 5th, Colorado takes the lead in fracking regulations. Colorado is way beyond the fracking regulations in New York by forcing disclosure of proprietary chemicals, public disclosure, you know, not private. You know, people on the ground need to know what chemicals we're dealing with. Let's see, January 5th, also, fracking, the ultimate scam revealed. This talks, thanks. This talks about the economics of this, scam, yeah. January 5th, fracking will poison New York drinking water, critics warn. That's not just a critic, that's a DEC employee from upstate by Watertown, Paul Hertzler. And thank you, Paul Hertzler, if you end up reading this. Hydraulic fracturing, what the frack are we doing to the planet? This hit PC World. So 3 years ago when we started looking for articles, or 4 years ago on fracking, who would have thought PC World is picking it up? You know, January 5th, public health effects of fracking need study. CDC scientists say, that's CDC scientists in Bloomberg. January 5th, man-made quakes, blame fracking and drilling, NPR. January 5th, solar panels compete with cheap natural gas. Yes, it's really, solar panels have to compete with cheap natural gas because the gas is cheap. I could go on and talk about exporting and more earthquakes, and just one last thing is that nice article on, this is such a good DEC article, January 2nd, Inspector General finds worker failed to divest. Investigation shows DEC employee did not disclose oil and gas firm connection from the Times Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.